Are you building a technology company? Are you doing a service company? You got to understand who you are, and then it's very easy for you to move forward. All right. So at the end of the day, and I think it's also with other entrepreneurs as well. It really depends on what is your business, right? If your business model is to say, look, I'm actually need to care for someone, right? Then you should be spending time to get the caregiver, send them to the home, and then figure out how to maybe work on the business side, the charging them, things like that. It doesn't actually mean that you should be spending more time on the app. Do I look this way? Look the camera?
Yeah, you can watch the camera, or when there's a conversation, you can watch me like
Okay.
this, or when you're about to announce that you're gonna release like a $10,000 for the people, then you can watch the camera.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask for $10,000 from the audience.
Oh yeah.
No.
Anyways, we're gonna start in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode on the Long with FVR. Today we have Martin. Thanks for doing this, man.
Thank you. Hi, Fabian.
So we were discussing about the very nice landscapes around this particular place and how unique is architecture compared to other places. I'm very happy that you made it here. How was the commuting to come here for you?
Thank you so much. So basically, it's been a really busy year so far. So I think the last 3 months especially, as we're wrapping up our services on elder care. So actually, this was a few times that I missed the appointment, so I apologize for that. But finally on Friday, we were able to find some time, and I'm so happy to have this kind of podcast and discussion. For us, we are based in PJ, so Petaling Jaya, that's about 20 minutes away. But there were a few meetings that I had, so we've been talking to a lot of developers, actually in Shah Alam as well. So I came about 40 minutes away actually. Yeah, so I came over to Business School.
I've been on that place, Shah Alam. Like all of the sudden, very nice area, a lot of night lights.
Yeah.
In fact, the Double Tree by Hilton is the closest I've ever been to Dubai.
Oh, really?
Because they have the same branch of hotel, the same level, and it's like,
Right.
oh, it's unique. And
Right.
also they have the New Year Bowl.
Right.
The big bowl they have right outside.
Right.
Very, very cool.
Very cool.
People will be watching you and they will be like, okay,
Yeah.
we want to know more about the guests. So can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure. So basically, I came into this entrepreneurship, and now I actually run a company called Concierge. So we are an elder care senior living company. I started in 2017. That's my first fervor into kind of entrepreneurship. So 2017, basically started doing a company for aged care. So what we do is that we actually provide nurses, therapists, and caregivers to the homes, helping the seniors. So since 2017, that's about 8 years now, we've actually now also operate centers as well. So now we have about 9 centers. We call them assisted living homes. Some people may refer that to a nursing home, but we have the whole works. So we currently run our centers in Kuala Lumpur, also in Penang. So we got 2 centers there and 7 centers in KL. Yep.
That's a huge volume that has been growing up in the last many years. I want to start your journey from the very early years. So, how was at the beginning of this decision to say, I want to do entrepreneurship? How it started?
So that's a very good question. I've been asked that many times. So I actually did not start in any business. In fact, the good thing is that you mentioned about this building itself and the architecture. So I started as an architect. So my major was in architecture. I come from a family of architects as well. That's all we knew. We liked about design. I studied in Australia, in Sydney. Basically, a lot about the design thing was something that I really passionate about. And to this day I am. So even our centers as well has that kind of inclination to make sure the design is done well. But coming back to the question is that why did I get into this entrepreneurship thing and also to start a business? It was actually, there were 2 things actually. The first thing is that I wanted to also venture outside to do something out of my comfort zone. I always wanted to be, in a sense, doing a business that I believed in, and it had to be something a bit more impactful. I think the second reason also is that I also found that passion because I was also fortunate enough to also work together on aged care projects as an architect, and also I also had the privilege because my family, my father actually wanted to do this development project in Malaysia, and so he asked his son, the youngest one, to come and see what we could do about it. So I learned about in terms of taking care of the elderly, how to do retirement, and also family-wise, I had to take care of my grandmother before, so I knew this was a big issue to solve. And so when we looked around, I said, oh, actually, it's not so easy that people cannot find the care. So is there an opportunity to do something like that? My father's project did not take off as much. It was a property one, but during that period, something fostered in me, right? To say, okay, there's something that I don't just give it up and go back to architecture. I think there's something there. So that was a conversation maybe 15 years ago, and as the many years I also realized, oh, actually there are things that we need to do that people are not doing. So when you talk about aged care services, we still people didn't have the kind of quality of care that they needed. It was very difficult to find that care, right? So I said, okay, time to start something, and I took the opportunity to do that. So rather than go back into architecture, I decided then to learn about entrepreneurship. But the way that I did it was to read a few books here and there, and then also spend some time with Malaysia. Last time they had this Magic accelerator program. So that was in Putrajaya. So then I kind of, that was during the period of Uber coming up, and they're talking about, you can actually do a startup. So learned a bit of that. Then I found that, actually it actually exists to actually run your own business. Why don't I try something? And then knowing that the passion for seniors and aged care is something I wanted to go in, then we jumped in, something like that. Yeah.
That's a fascinating journey because all of a sudden, from the architecture realm, you're going into the business of healthcare,
Yes.
the senior living healthcare, which is very important, given that nowadays humans are living longer than expected many years ago.
That's right.
And your idea was to only be in KL, or you also expanded as it was organically going?
To be honest, I wasn't very sure at that point. I think the early stages was that Uber was something very big at that time. I think my taxi became Grab during the period, so everyone was kind of looking at that. And I knew I had an element of digitalization that I wanted to do. So part of the other part of the story is that when I started it, I didn't do it on my own. I actually brought in a co-founder who was also incidentally my schoolmate from high school. And he was his name is Justin, and he's also a tech person. So we developed the platform and the app and all these kind of things, right? So that kind of made it. Our goal was actually then to scale quickly, scale up very fast. So our idea was that maybe let's go international, right? Let's start off in Malaysia. I think understanding the business model of guys like Rocket Internet, talking about the Zaloras and Lazada, we wanted to kind of go into that platform and also be like an Uber. But having said that, after a certain point of doing it, then we realized that actually the more important thing is actually, what does the client want as well, right? So while we were developing this, the model of it is that we will send caregivers to home. So we had to get the nurse, we get the matrons, and then what we realized was that actually the more important thing is to make sure that the business side of it, the first client to get, they weren't so interested so much in the app. They were interested in the service that you provided. So then it was kind of a good learning to say, actually the more important thing is that, okay, who's going to be your client, right? And then from that point of view, we also adjusted and said, okay, why don't we go on the ground more, right? See what the clients want. And then it's a very localized solution that we needed to do. So rather than think about the app being a kind of a portal to transport, it was a supporting kind of a product. So it's more like a project management tool. That means if I could use it to monitor what the caregiver goes to home, then the family will be quite happy about that. So that we decided to then localize ourselves to say, look, forget about the overseas market for now. Let's try to understand the local market, take care of the people here. And so far, even in this trajectory over the last 8 years, we've been very much localized in terms of our mindset. So I think the idea is that we need to be stabilized here. We need to, there's a lot of growth. We are also building up an academy as well. So once we do that, there's a lot of potential overseas, but I think the focus is to become stable and to look at this market first.
You mentioned about the academy, and that's something that is kind of new.
Yes.
So can you tell us what is the academy going on?
Yeah, sure. So for us, senior care is very much related to a human touch, right? The touch point has always been people that take care of you, right? So for example, when we talk about the caregivers, they are very much a very integral part of whatever services that we provide. And actually in the group itself, for example, you talk about buildings and nursing homes and things like that. If you take away the carers, if you take away the professionals or the healthcare professionals and all the activity coordinators, technically no one will be staying there. So the key aspect is actually making sure that you invest in the training of our caregivers, right? So therefore we had to come up with our own academy, One thing also is that Malaysia is also it's a very not to say young country. I know statistics show what if 20, 30, 15% of population will be aging population. And although we talk about countries like Singapore or Japan and China, they have super aged population. So Malaysia is still considered a young nation in a sense. But what that also means is that because this is not such a big issue as opposed to in Japan, where more than 33% of the population, right, is affected. So the conversation is very new here, right? And so when we talk about training or getting caregivers, usually we talk about nurses. If not, the other conversation is about having a maid, a domestic help at home. But what we're trying to also explain in a sense is that you actually need professional caregivers, which other countries, they're already starting to develop. So that conversation had to start here early, and then when we looked at, we need to get the workforce. Where is the accreditation? Where's the universities, institutions, and then even the government also is very early stages. So then they say, okay, we actually don't have a lot of these things. Either is there a nurse, or you can import or get domestic helpers. So what we then had to do was to create our own academy. So in order to do that, we had to go basically as pretty much like a startup. You start talking to a lot of people, and institutions to say, would you like to do something like caregiving? And they say, what's that, right? Eventually, we were very lucky that we talked to University of Tunggal Rahman. Utah is a local university, but their medical and nursing team were very interested to do this because they also could see that population-wise, it's inevitable that the demographics for seniors are going to increase. Then the question is, who's going to take care of them, right? So then they said, okay, well, let's pool all their resources. Let's come up with our own certification that will help to give that clarity in terms of what a caregiver does, and also try to elevate it. So I think it's also in a sense similar to last time we talked about the taxi drivers as opposed to a Grab driver. You're elevating the industry. So we are looking for caregivers that are very compassionate but also have a lot of skills. So I think one of the things to note about a caregiver is you got to be a negotiator, right? You got to negotiate with the seniors because an elderly has many different conditions, right? You're talking about an active senior as opposed to someone that may be on onset of dementia, their memories are losing, as opposed to palliative end of life. There's so many things that you want to take care of. So you've got to be a good negotiator, you've got to be able to help out with what you call ADLs, active daily living, so bathing, showering, feeding, the basic stuff. At the same time, you also got to be able to be compassionate and also think about ways that you can be, can be a psychologist as well. So that meant that when we looked at the fundamentals of what a caregiver should be, then we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, with this academy, we have to train these people. We need to also find them. So that is how the academy happened.
That's very important because it's not only in the realization that, hey, there's a new space to actually profit from this because this is a business. But at the same time, wait a second. You can be a pioneer, but also, hey, it's time to help the society as well.
Yes. So that's one of the reasons why I got into this business because it also fulfilled the other part is that it's giving back to society. So I think one of the things is that firstly, it's a very unique industry, right? We are actually helping people. And number two is that you can always use ways of thinking or innovation or design thinking to make it better, right? Because what also generated it is that if you look at all the care that we require, one of the biggest issues for us, maybe it's sidelining a little bit, but one of the issues that we have is that when many years ago, even for my parents, right, when my grandparents got a stroke, my grandmother had a stroke, it was a very traumatic experience. So that's a senior person, but she had a stroke because of the age, right? So that happens to a lot of people. Either get a stroke, they got dementia and things like that, or they had a fall, and at the age, it's you got a lot of mobility problems. Then the question is, the whole family goes, oh my God, what do we do, right? Then the first thing is that they give a call to someone they know. It could be a doctor, it could be one. So then we realize is that actually people really panic at that time, and rightfully so, because suddenly your whole world totally changes. Then the question is that, is there anyone that can advise you on this? Can someone tell you, what, don't worry about it, actually get to this hospital, get the basic care first, and then after that think about the plan. So if you had, let's say, stroke, right? There are different types of stroke, but let's assume that it's a hemorrhagic stroke. You've done that, they stabilize you. Then the question usually the hospital says, okay, now is your time to go home. There are not enough beds here. right? Who's going to take care of you? Then it's up to you. So then you can think, okay, actually I need a physio therapy. You also need to have a nurse. You need someone to then help with speech, that kind of thing. And then you've also got to think about, oh, actually, most of us got to go back to work. You know, you can't actually spend most of the time, so then you need a caregiver. So in a lot of the cases, what we are doing now is actually looking at the market and saying, okay, this is quite important, right? It's actually helping a lot of families, and because it's helping a lot of families, it's not just that we create a business that requires that. We also need to do something to make their life easier. So we are quite lucky in the sense that we use the technology. We also talk about training. The technology helps the families to understand what goes on, right? And also guide them through. So every person that we have as a client, we actually take care of the entire family. So we have a care manager that answers the call, helps them through the whole process. And that also is something that's a bit new in this industry. So you're not just taking a caregiver, you're actually taking the entire team to support you. Yeah.
I remember there was a quote when people are raising their kids, it takes a village.
Yes.
Also to take care of the elders, it
Yeah.
takes a village as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I'm surprised to see how the introduction of this is helping a lot of people to have more peace of mind.
Yeah.
Because that's maybe
Yeah.
the biggest variable.
Yes.
All of a sudden you find this impact and you don't know how to react because you've
Yeah.
never been there. The really value that you are delivering is the peace of mind for them, because
Absolutely.
that's tangible. So
Yes,
so
absolutely.
how were the stories when you began to receive the feedback from the people who realize that the impact that your company is delivering
Yeah.
is giving them a lot?
So the feedback has been good. At the same time, I mean, we're not the finished product. So in any way, and I think it's also just to kind of put into expectation as well. I think we're always learning and trying to improve. That also means is that it's also a very human-centric industry. So there's always going to be things that's why I mentioned negotiating and things like that, right? Meaning is that sometimes you get a good carer, sometimes the carer's personality is different. But I think the feedback is overwhelmingly positive, partly because we're also realizing a lot of people have been suffering themselves. Meaning, so give you an example, it's like you talk about business, you talk about work, right? When something happens with a family, usually it's also become a little bit of a gender-centric situation, because majority or let's say example in Asia, right? There are some responsibility of certain people to quit their jobs to take care of the family members, right? And that either means that it could be the youngest one in the family, or the one that is not career-minded per se. So sometimes we get siblings like this that they say, okay, mom, dad, needs some care right now. So someone has to either find enough resources or money to do this and find a carer, or someone has to quit the job and do this, right? And it unfortunately also affects a lot of women as well, because they kind of go to back, or you're the kind of the one to take care of the family. So that peace of mind is important, because now if you want to build your career, if you want to have to, in terms of these issues, you can get a carer to come to help you out. Or if not, you come to one of our facilities, our centers. We are not so much like the old folks home, right? It's actually a very nice environment. So next time I'll give you a tour if you're free. It's very different, right? So then the peace of mind is that when your parents or yourself needs to check in, it's a nice environment. It's about social activities. It's not just a place that you dump people there, right? And they can have their own vibrant lifestyle as well. And the same thing in the home, right? So if all is that taken care of, you can also continue to work. You can continue to also have your own life with your other, your children as well, right? So I think the term now is that a lot of people are going through this. They call them the sandwich generation, because they have to take care of their parents and they have to take care of the kids. So they can't sandwich in between. So that elevating the or getting rid of the anxiety or the stress is very important, and I think that's where we are looking at, and also the fact that people are more aware. So when they are more aware that, oh, actually there's some help, whether or not they come to us or whether or not they come to other people, the key is that they're having a conversation already, where sometimes they kept, oh, actually I think I'm the only one having to suffer this, so I keep quiet. So I think our next approach is not just about the B2C in a sense. We are also now approaching a lot of companies, corporates. We've talked to some companies like Lenovo, Ernst & Young, and things like that, and they've been very, very supportive of their own employees, because it's also now an ESG-centric model, where, oh, actually the employees may be suffering this and then they're suffering silence. So now we're going there to have that conversation to say, you know what, is everything okay with parents? Are you having a conversation with them? And if anything, maybe you need to learn some of these skills, that will be on for you for life. So these are life skills that I think for example, you say, I don't think those skills will be replicated by an AI anytime soon. So that's something that is actually good for investing in that kind of skills and knowledge too.
I'm happy that you mentioned one of the variables of the environmental, social, and governance that is to give the mental health in check.
Yes.
Because I see across the region that there is a huge discussion starting to come up, like
Yeah.
in order to keep our workforce balanced and accountable, and also delivering, they need to have the peace of mind.
Yep.
They need to have the mental health 100%, and that helps a lot. Now, let's go on the business side of the entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
How was the moment that you decided, okay, it's time to do either bootstrap or to start pitching for funding? How was the dialogue of the entrepreneur with the co-founder saying, okay,
Yeah.
let's see how we can do this?
That's a very interesting question. I think so. The fundamental of our business is that early on, I think we weren't very sure whether or not we wanted to raise money. To be honest, didn't know what to start, right? But I think one of my mentors, in a sense, also mentioned, look, the most basic function of your business is that it must make sense. Like, what are you raising money for, right? So if you need to do something to show that it works, then look at the MVP, right? So at the end of the day, that's why the question was that, are you building a technology company? Are you doing a service company? You got to understand who you are, and then it's very easy for you to move forward. All right. So at the end of the day, and I think it's also with other entrepreneurs as well. It really depends on what is your business, right? If your business model is to say, look, I'm actually need to care for someone, right? Then you should be spending time to get the caregiver, send them to the home, and then figure out how to maybe work on the business side, the charging them, things like that. It doesn't actually mean that you should be spending more time on the app. So I think in the early stages, I also didn't know. That's why I mentioned when we went to the Magic Accelerator, the center, we also then only pitched a bit later, right? But the early stages, then we saw a lot of other companies coming up, and then we very much early realized that we're not really 100% on like a SaaS model or a technology app, right? Because the question is that who's going to pay for it? Then you say, what is the pain point that you have to solve? So if the problem is to actually elevate the pain of reducing the pain of the families by giving them some certainty, is because you have a good caregiver to go, then you should focus on that. And then the other parts are secondary. So only after maybe we bootstrapped it a lot. So me and my partner, I was fortunate enough. I didn't have much obligations at the time, so for me it was like, okay, just bootstrap as much as possible. But I got my partner to work on the app together at night, and he was also working because he also had his wife, his kids, and things like that. So it's not easy. So he had continued to work on what he needed to do in MNC. But for me, it was like, okay, figure it out, 100%, 7 days a week trying to work that out. So it took us a bit of time to get it going. A lot of credit cards were swiping, a lot of no money for a while. But once we started going, then we go through different stages. So the first stage was, people started using our service. I started to try to look at networks of caregivers and things like that. What makes our business also a little bit interesting is because we are also quite wide spectrum. So I mean, the first start for us was that if you want to do a nursing home, you needed to get money to build it, right? You needed some asset or you need some operation money. So we didn't need to do that. Home care, sending to the home is easy. You just find a caregiver, then you get paid. So you could start bootstrapped. But eventually, as we built it and suddenly we had a bit more traction, then some investors came in and said, look, your first love is also to do a nursing home, right? I said, yeah, actually, as being an architect, I also wanted to make sure that we make a big difference in terms of our centers, right? It's got to be something totally different from an old folks home, right? So now they said, okay, I'll invest some money into it. So that's when I came in at that time. But it came in a bit later.
I'm happy that you make the difference, because one thing is the service and the quality of the product. Another thing is the infrastructure.
Yes.
And that can attract two different kind of investors.
Absolutely. Yes.
So it's like, how can I differentiate my actual product that is like a service versus somebody who just wants to buy a building or repurpose for something else in the future,
That's right.
decades from now.
That's right.
And it's like, intellectual property. Let's discuss about how you protect the intellectual property for this age and how to actually keep helping more people.
So you talk about IP, intellectual property per se. To be honest, because our business is very much on a care-centric point of view, so it has to do a lot with SOPs. It has to do with a lot of
Okay.
processes. But having said that, none of it is technically IP protected in a
Alright.
sense. Like we don't have an algorithm that tells us exactly what it is, right? The innovation that we had for our caregivers and our app is more like a project management tool. Meaning is that we give badges to caregivers, right? So that means if to ascertain their condition, whether or not the person is actually skilled, right? We don't have a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. This is a very vocational job. So some of that innovation is saying, look, why don't we award them like the scouts, the gamification of badges and things like that, and then using that to match. But if you ask on that note, like for example, you can hand wash, you get a badge. If you're able to do, transferring someone, you get a badge. So you try to get those things. Now, when you talk about IP part of it, that much is kind of a general rule, right? So we don't really need to, or we did we tried to ask in terms of the, the IP lawyers and things like that. But I said, look, that kind of system, actually, a lot of people know about it. So you want to protect about it. There's not much. If you want to spend a lot of time doing that. So we said, okay, fine, we'll just focus on what we do service-wise, and the market will just react to it. So in that sense, property-wise, the only thing is our branding. So we have our brand, our name, those are the things that we do have some measure of control and also protect it as well.
Something I realize about the ecosystem that an incubator delivers is
Yeah.
the importance of the co-founder.
Yeah.
And can you tell us how was the starting of this relationship? Because you need somebody that can carry the weight with you,
Yes.
especially in the most crucial moments of the company when
Yes.
you are about to do such a big decision.
Oh, absolutely. So, for me, I believe you can't do everything by yourself, and I was very blessed and also very honored as well, is because the people that are in my company. So I mentioned about my co-founder. So he's in the same high school. So I know him for many years, right? We always hang out together. In fact, we still do with the same bunch of friends. So I think that also helps with knowing that someone's stable, someone they can trust, and you know their weaknesses and their strengths, right? So that gives me a little bit of edge because at the same time I had many years to understand the nuances of the character. If you get someone new, then you have to make sure that there is some fit. Because at the end of the day, what you say is absolutely right. Any business so far, what I've seen is that it needs to make sure that the founders, co-founders, and even senior management work very well together. Because at the end of the day, the company is really about the people, right? You can have all the algorithms in the works and things like that, but to have a successful business is to make sure that everyone works well. Now, works well doesn't mean that everyone's doing extremely high performance or certain things like that. I think it's about making sure that they're all integrated and knowing what parts you can work, so that you can balance the pros and the cons. Surely for me myself, there are also things that I'm not as good as my partner as well. Like he does technology. He's actually a much in terms of the person on the ground doing things. He's the more gung ho person in the entrepreneurship part. But also to let you know, it's not just him that I knew from high school. The initial angel investors, majority of them were from my school as well. Because I think to me, stability was one thing, and also knowing them was good. So I think in any kind of, it's grown since then. We've got investors, institutional investors coming in already. But the thing is that as long as you have a very good dynamic team, then I think that's always the first thing. And I think a lot of investors have mentioned many times, right? At the end of the day, they're not investing in the company, only investing in the people. So that's a very key part of it.
People.
Yeah.
That's a keyword I see when you are dealing with the startups, the VC ecosystem, but also I see that in the private wealth management, in the family office, especially here in Asia.
Yeah.
And it's like, it all goes down to people.
Yeah.
Like, can I trust this to the distance? And
Yeah.
it's very relevant. Given the opportunity that you had to interact with many of these angels and VCs, most of them they need to allocate capital because of their mandates. Sometimes there are compromises. And I want to ask you, which was the most difficult compromise that you faced during your journey?
Um, okay, so interesting enough, I don't have that much experience. I think recently it's only been a while since we had our first round where we got institution investors. So we're talking about interesting enough, we have a PE and a VC coming in the same round, right? So I think for us it was a new journey. Like this has, I've never had it in my mind in terms of reading term sheets, going through the duty in terms of all the rights inside there. So everything we have to learn as we go. And I think at the end of the day, it's a good process for us. So I would say it's a compromise. I think the question was that it's a lot of listening, understanding, and then see is the right fit. So I've been, in a sense, very blessed is that when the investors came in, it was not just about putting money in, which is the least of everything, right? I think it's about making sure it's the right fit and whether or not they understand or we fit in the same position together. What I also mean is that there'll probably be a lot of investors that came into us. Some of them, like you mentioned, even family officers, that they have a certain criteria, or some investors says, look, can you give me a strong IRR, that kind of thing. And at the early stages, we weren't ready. So at the early stages, we were lucky that we had certain grants. We went to Cradle, pitched to them and said, okay, we need some coaching, right? It's not just about giving us the initial sum. We actually don't really know how to build this business. And every stage as you go, then you learn something different. Like, at this stage now, we've got our board, we have our board meetings, and we've got our investors that help us to build, in terms of the networking and things like that. But you asked me if we did it 4 or 5 years ago, I think I would have been super raw, right? I think we'd be just focusing on a business without understanding. It'd be too much of a time. And I think it'd be the same thing for us now. That are we ready to go, let's say, next step to IPO and things like that. I think we're at the stage where we are now about growth, we are learning about the business. We don't have to be zealous about getting the funds if we're not ready per se, right? But at the end of the day, our goal is to build a sustainable business, and that means is that we have to take everything in consideration before we get anyone. So I also know that money is not free. So everything comes with a price. So we then have to weigh to see whether or not it's a good opportunity or not. Same with our partnerships together with developers as well. Same thing.
It's true. Like you will always see in these incubators about the tech companies, the
Yeah.
pressure to grow quick
Yeah.
and do go the exponential, the escape velocity, and I
Yeah.
like you took the patience to say, let's focus on our product first.
Yeah.
Let's focus on what we can deliver and generate this value for our clients, and then we can take it from there.
So it's easier said than done because
Uh-huh.
in reality the issue also is that opportunity of time as well, right? We've got so many different things happening. You've got competitors coming in. So if you wanted to build something very stable, and it depends on your business as well, right? For example, for us, we also need to scale at a certain pace. We cannot keep to certain size because now our money coming in also allows us to then use that to grow, right? And there's also the opportunity to say that our landscape of competition ages ago is very different from our landscape now, right? So if we wanted to slow down and things like that, then our team has to be smaller. Our resources will be less because you don't need that, right? You just want to make that true. And you're also going to be worried that someone else comes in and just totally wipe out the face. So for our market as well is that in order to make some changes or improvements in terms of our services, we're actually looking a little bit more because just to give an example, right? We talk about caregivers, that's the first phase. But now you're talking about population of 15% that you want to take care of. You're starting to think about how to care of them financially. You're thinking about the infrastructure that you have, right? So let's say we wanted to build better homes, and scale helps to make it more efficient. And also, let's say, the scale of the building allows you to have more facilities as opposed to, let's say, an old folks home with a bungalow. So those are the considerations you have that, okay, well, I need some money to do this because it gives us a better opportunity to do that, or I need to invest in technology to make sure that it happens. So we always talk about quality and care. That has to be the number one. But at the same time, there's also opportunity that sometimes you just have to jump in and say, okay, well, we still have to grow, right? We still need to make sure that we protect ourselves as a business. Competition is coming out there, and there's an opportunity to take the market. So that's all that whole conversation that you have in your head, rather than just talking about the timing as well.
That's a good clarification because many aspiring entrepreneurs, many aspiring founders,
Yeah.
they may have that and they will be like, wait a second, am I the only one thinking about this?
Yeah.
And when they see you, it's like, wait a second, more than one people at different stages,
Yeah.
they experience the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's quite relevant. Now, given the opportunity that you had to impact this, can you tell us what else is coming on?
What's coming on?
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm still very focused on aged care, senior living. That's going to be our main focus. The question now is about us scaling a little bit more. So our last round means that we need to invest in more properties, and that's not a secret, right? So the thing is that we also from the two business units that we look at. So the main to simplify it, we have a home care that we send to the home, and then we've got the residence care, which is all our properties and things. We're asset light. That means we actually work with developers, operators for that. We're growing our portfolio of residence care, meaning is that we want to look. Firstly, it's still back in Malaysia, but every state we should have some nursing homes there, right? Or assisted living for them. And for our home care side, we want to scale as well. So our goal is that having more services. So what we are looking at and launching in a few months' time is actually something focusing on, let's say, stroke care, right? Meaning that if you need an entire package per se, right, of services, we have the whole team for you. That means we've upgraded the skill sets. We've got the doctors involved, you've got the therapists involved, and all this stuff. So we are planning to launch that across the board. So then the new products that we're launching, and also to do it nationwide.
Yeah, it's very important to see that you have all of those across the nation.
Yeah.
There are two states that are not in the peninsula, but they are in the Borneo Island,
Yes.
Sabah and Sarawak.
Yes.
I believe there has been also demand to have coverage there. How's
Absolutely.
been that going on?
Well, yeah, so next week I'm actually going to Sabah. So one thing about Sabah and Sarawak is that there are a lot of potential. But number two is that they will actually have a very good workforce of people there. So one of the things about caregiving is that you've got a workforce that's very urban, and then you've got the rural areas as well, right? And what we're looking at is that giving opportunities to those that may not see caregiving as an industry to grow. But so for Sabah Sarawak, one of the good things and about the people there is that actually they're very good at this job. Meaning is that their temperament is good, they're kind of compassion to do this. So one of the things we're looking at strategically is that going to Sabah and Sarawak is also to actually set up our academy stronger there. But we do have also plans to actually open centers there as well. We're actually partnering with a developer in Kuching actually. So therefore, we look at Borneo as part of our plan as well. It's definitely quite exciting. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. And if we see from the macro perspective, as you mentioned at the beginning, that one of the ideas was to also go international, that would be maybe the best avenue to go towards Indonesia, given that the Borneo Island shares territory. But those are things
Yeah.
that comes with time,
Yep.
because the product itself is developing its strength and
Yeah.
its differentiation compared to the competitors.
Yeah.
Now, given that you have been putting a lot of this, founders usually have a rhetorical question, which is, uh, do you have a life? So tell us about how you balance that,
Yep.
if there is a possibility to do so.
Okay, that's a very interesting question. Usually we don't get asked that question. But yes, now is a little bit more stable. I do have a life, I think. Just recently, I actually got married. So
Congratulations.
thank you very much. But at the same time, it's also having a little bit of balance. I think. I think what I've realized in the first few years, it was very difficult, and the timing for me to do have more personal space was because you need to it's just like having I assume that giving birth to someone takes a lot of energy, but after that then maybe you have a bit more time. So I think the first few years I had to spend more of that, but now I think it's about being more rounded, meaning is that you got to rely on your team, then now it's for them to come up, at the same time then your role changes a little bit, like it's not just about hustling all the time. Now it's actually about being more strategic, and in order to be more strategic and thought process, you need to be more all-rounded, meaning is that the free times that you have to, let's say, for holidays, to meet other people, things like that. Actually refreshes your mind, right? So you kind of have a balance so that allows you to have a fresh perspective. Like having an interview with you as well, or having this podcast is actually something refreshing as well, because usually I wouldn't have the time to do that, but I say, oh, actually it's good to actually do this. Come to the business school, look at things in a different perspective. So I think the learnings are very different. Another thing to mention is that I've also got some some coaching as well, right? And I've got this group that's called Vistage. I'm not sure if you heard of it, but this is a group that we commit to every month to go. That in my group there's other CEOs as well, or in terms of senior management. And what they do also is then they go through not just coaching but also to sharing, right? But why I mention this is also because you mentioned about work-life or balancing. It's important. So that conversation is also there to, as we continue to grow, right? Are there people that can support you? Can they look at things at different perspective? It's also very important. Whether or not that's life balance, or whether or not that's actually opening your eyes to see other things. So that is a key part. So yes, I'm trying to have a bit more life, doing other sports, hobbies and things like that as well.
That's refreshing, as you mentioned, in that word, because the ethos of, oh, we need to hustle, we need to do that every day, and it's like, hey, let's chill. Try to chill, because you improve the view, especially when you're going the distance. We need to say going the distance because it's like we want to enjoy this ride as much as possible.
Yeah.
And this ride that you have has been unique.
Yeah.
From the business perspective,
Yeah.
what you wish you learned, what you wish you knew before starting this business?
Oh man, that's a lot of things you would like to learn. That you made mistakes and all this kind of thing. I think in overall, of course, I think when I started this journey, I think it could have started a bit earlier. And I think the time that you spend, or now, okay, so I guess the learning is that there's so many things you can learn. So the thing is, you cannot go back and say, oh, the things that I want to learn. But I think it's the mindset, I suppose, right? If I known earlier that, oh, actually, there are two things that could happen is that earlier I could realize, oh, actually, there's a lot of things that you can do, right? You just have to believe in it and go for it. Always, I think the fear sets in, like, oh, I need to get a stable job, I need to do that kind of thing. So knowing that earlier, then at least you can explore. And everything is risky, but not risky. Like it's risky not to do it, not to do anything in a sense. So having that gung ho thing was something that you learn as you go. If someone told me that, that'd be good at the time. But other than that, I think so far the journey has been, I would say it happens as it goes. Like you have to take that step before you take the next step. So even if I wanted to fast track it, there are things that maybe people have been told me before, and I say, oh, I don't think that applies to me. But now, from retrospectively, you say, oh, actually, that was something very important, and I'm using that to impart to my team as well, and I also realize that sometimes they're not at the stage to get it. So I think some things are just it has to go through a process. It's just whether or not you see it as a way of learning. And so then maybe the mindset is, so look, I think things will happen, but just be comfortable about it, right? Like you said, enjoy the journey. It's a marathon. I maybe thought that last time, let's make a few $100 million or $1 billion by a certain age. I don't think that works out, because at the end of the day, what is your goal, right? What is your intention? If your intention is to have a good life, give back to people, then you should be looking at every day to be grateful, and then you work together, because problems are problems. They're going to happen every single day, but you also have solutions as well that you'll be comfortable. So it's really a journey that I think for entrepreneurs as well is that you cannot look at the highs and just forget about the lows. So in that sense, you got to be very stable. Or to me, is that every day you wake up, you continue. You got to be happy with yourself. You cannot think that maybe I've got to be successful, only then I'll be happy. I think that will not make you a happy person. I'll put it that way.
It's a good quote that you mentioned, because it's the analogy of you want to find somebody and then you will become happy. It's like, no, you are supposed to be happy by your own.
Yes.
Otherwise, you will never be happy. Like here,
Yes.
like you want to be successful and then you will be happy. Like you need to be happy.
Yes.
Regardless.
Yes, correct.
Because otherwise, the pursuit will only give you like, when I'm gonna become happy. There is always one more level.
Absolutely. So it's always the grass is greener on the other side. But then one thing I also been a bit more grateful in a sense to say that, oh, actually people now are starting to say, oh, yeah, you're doing very well and things like that. And then naturally maybe the kind of imposter syndrome, something, no, I'm not there, But maybe it doesn't matter. I think the key is that you go into being an entrepreneur or business not for the value of the success. I think it has to be more. So it must be something that drives you on a day-to-day basis. So if you want to improve something, you want to have a better, outcome, that drives you to wake up every day to do that, right? If it's based on success, then I see a lot of people that oh, I want to become the next, Facebook or Meta or things like that, and then when things don't go well, then they quit. But that's the time when actually you figure out yourself, or you figure, you keep on solving problems, right? So just like when we did this caregiving thing, there are many times in the journey I thought, oh crap, why am I doing this? In fact, today I will have a lot of problems as well, right? But you just continue going. But the question is why, right? If you have the good reason, so it's very cliche actually. A lot of processes that you read, I'm sure based on experience as well, is that hey, actually it's true. You just have to believe what you want to do, right? And continue on. So it is very much a marathon. And for all those entrepreneurs and startup going, don't give up, right? At the end of the day, if you believe in it, just keep on going. You learn the journey, then you adjust. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. Yeah.
When you mention that reminds me the recent words of the CEO of NVIDIA, because he mentions about expectations, but also the resilience.
Yes.
People and organizations who are more resilient, they go the distance.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, when you forget your why, then you forget who you were,
Yeah.
and you decide, okay, it's not for me.
Yeah.
And that's the main eliminator.
Oh, absolutely, you're right. Yeah. I think just to add to that, yeah, he's been resilient for many, many years. And the thing is that if he's successful today, there are many days that he's not successful. And then tomorrow, what happens if they collapse? Are you considered yourself to be successful or not, right? So I think the key resilience is very important. The word grit has always been used, right? And you just have to build it for, you just have to continue. So at the end of the day, that's right, you got to have the right reasons to push you through the days that you really feel really crappy about it. And that's why you mentioned like founders, partners are so important, because it takes a village, right? Doing it alone is difficult, crazy, right? And there are times when you need emotional support, either from your family or from your loved ones or from your partners. So that whole network of people working together is what makes it successful, right? I think over the many years, you don't talk about companies, you talk about nations, you're talking about villages, that whole concept of people coming together in one direction, right? But I guess as the main figurehead or the entrepreneur or startup, you kind of have to give that direction to people. Then people will say, okay, I believe in it, let's go, right? But either way, everyone's got to work hard, right? That's the bare minimum, right? That's at least what you need to do.
I cannot find better ways to put this in a perspective. We talked about life, we talked about business, we also talked about how was the environment.
Yeah.
Let's take a small time travel, and can you tell us how were the years when you were growing up?
Right.
Because you mentioned you grew up in a family of architects.
Yeah.
So how was that country, how was that city back then?
Yeah. So personally, I've been blessed as well that I didn't have to go through much hardship, to be honest. My parents, especially my father, provided for us, and also in terms of we were very grounded, right? So I think that stability helped a lot. Everyone has their own experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing is also the culture of the workplace at home. So I mentioned myself as being one of the architects. I'm also the youngest in my family. Of the other two siblings themselves are architects. And the design thinking that we had for architecture started from my father, right? He was always talking about ideas, he was talking about thought process, and now we talk about design innovation thinking. So every time we look around, we try to see, what works and what doesn't. So maybe a little bit critical per se, but always in a positive way. So even though we weren't very entrepreneurial, we always talked about working in a profession for someone, but always the idea came interesting enough. So my father at the same time was also trying to do some kind of innovative kind of models of business as well. Like he would he'll be consulting to people about the building, like for example, what can we do for this location. So architecture in a way is also about creative mindset, which was instilled in us. So in that sense, I'm blessed that there were no boundaries to say that, oh, you can't do this, right? Funny enough, my school that I went to was a private school in KL, also run by an entrepreneur or a business lady, a businesswoman. And her message all the time during the school was that you can do what you want. So if you work hard and do that, so that kind of enforces that it's okay to fail. I think that's a key word, right? It's you don't get frowned upon, but in Asian society, a lot of times the failure about that that you do something that you can fail is insurmountable. Then people don't want to try. So I'm also glad that I think this whole startup ecosystem is actually putting the message is that, look, if you fail, it doesn't matter, just climb up, right? Last time we talked about, if you don't do well, you get bankrupt, and the shame to your family, right? So I'm lucky my family is a little progressive, they didn't think about that, but I'm also happy that in terms of the culture environment, people are starting to say it doesn't matter, right? So I think that's a healthy thing.
It is also the rule of law on clear laws allows for businesses to always thrive, because I remember that in Japan the bankruptcy law is very criminal. Like if you fail, they will take you to jail. But in other places, you just file the Chapter 11 because we need to reorganize.
Yeah, correct.
And then all of a sudden, you can shuffle things around because you want still to be in the game.
Yes.
So those instruments are important not only for private business but also for private lives, to be honest.
Absolutely.
And I'm happy that you shared that particular picture, because that influenced your upbringing. And now, according to that timeline, I need to ask you, given that I have been talking with many people from Malaysia that sometimes they decide to study overseas, why Australia?
Why Australia? Well, I wasn't very original at that time. My father studied in Australia. They met there. So my mom's actually Thai. So they met in Australia. Then they came back here, started a family and things like that. So we always had a close roots in Australia. But what we also realized is that the education system there was actually quite good. I think for one thing is that going overseas also meant a fresh perspective for us or for myself. When I went there, I was like basically a fish out of the water, that kind of thing, because when you first start doing schooling and things like that, I went to the university there, right? University of Sydney. Everything was like, memorize, do all the work, study. And then I remember the first lecture was like, especially design and architecture, like, do whatever you want, just justify it. I was like, what? I need some structure and things like that. So I also realized is that the culture of a different society, I think for me that Western society was very contrasting to maybe the Asian-centric society that we have here. So as we continue going, then yes, definitely it was a big cultural shift that also improved my mindset as well. But having said that, I think Australia is a fantastic country because you have a lot of freedom of thought. There's a lot of opportunity there as well. I still have a lot of friends and also some family there as well. So I think, but having said that, every country also has its nuances. So Australia was something very interesting. I mean, it's nearby, and it's also very. I think also in terms of progressive thinking, that maybe also maybe shifted some of my mindset in terms of what is possible, what's available, and I think for a small country as well, they also got quite a lot of entrepreneurs and business that they come. So I learned that as well.
It's true. This reminds me when you talk with other people that they suggest endeavor. Try to see what you can capture there, and try to learn. Try to also see which are the analogies, the similarities, and also the differences. Because that's another question I usually ask, like which has been the little differences you've seen across the region. And you mentioned some right there that are quite relevant, which we thank you for this. And I cannot find a better way to realize that there will be young people also watching this. Among those, there will be some young Martins. So, question for you is, what piece of advice will you give to your younger self?
That's a good question. I think If I had to give some advice, I think enjoy the journey. I think rather than say that it was chasing. I think that was the same point before. I think advice wise is that look, the journey will cover itself. You still need to have grit. You still need to work hard. You still have determination. You still need to always be learning. I think that's also another thing, right? And experience life, and you never know when your inspiration will come, right? So just be open. Like I never in my million years would think I'm going to aged care, taking care of seniors, right? And I went to architecture, and I was looking at this, and suddenly I'm doing this as a business and having this interview, right? So I think you got to take it as it goes, enjoy the ride, but know that you got to do your work as well, right? I think it comes hand in hand. You got to do the work, you got to be resilient, but at the same time enjoy it.
I begun to hear right now the words of Denzel Washington, because
Alright.
he mentioned in an interview, like, do what you have to do so you can do what you want to do.
Oh, all right.
And it
I
felt
meant Denzel. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hey Denzel, I hope you're doing fine. And I cannot find a better way to close the interview. Thank you very
Fabian.
much,
Thank
man.
you so much.
How can people find you?
Well, technically you can always go to our Instagram or Facebook. I don't sell myself so much. Of course, you can go to LinkedIn. I think that's where we linked up. So you can look at me, Martin Yap. My company's Concierge, so look us up anytime, and just feel free to contact.
Martin, everybody. For
Thank you,
people out
Fabian.
there, please stay safe and see you when I see you. Bye.
Thank you.